dedicated to conveying value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today we're interpreting the book One Dimensional Man for You. Its subtitle is Studies in the Ideology of Advanced Industrial Society. To discuss this book, let's first look at an example from our daily lives. There was a Finnish company called Nokia. Before smartphones became popular, it was the world's largest mobile phone manufacturer. Although Nokia's dominance declined rapidly after the rise of smartphones, its slogan, technology human-oriented, still feels relevant today. Because in modern society, most people firmly believe technology is humanity's great helper. Its development liberates us and brings greater freedom. Yet half a century ago, American philosopher Herbert Marcuse warned us against technological optimism. He cautioned that technology doesn't bring freedom but builds high-tech cages that suppress humanity. Today we'll explore Marcuse's masterpiece, One-Dimensional Man, Herbert Marcuse. Marcuse was a German Jewish philosopher who studied under Martin Heidegger and later became a Marxist. Due to Nazi Germany's anti-Semitic policies during World War II, he fled to the United States after multiple displacements. Marcuse, he initially thought America was a free utopia without Germany's totalitarianism, but longer exposure revealed how, even in this advanced industrial society, people remained unfree, with technology as the accomplice. At 76, Marcuse produced this brilliant philosophical work addressing this phenomenon. Don't be intimidated by its complex title, though, because his core question is actually quite straightforward. After 201, leftist intellectuals were deeply puzzled. If Marx's theory holds that advanced capitalism inevitably sparks proletarian revolution, why didn't industrialized nations like America experience one? Marcuse offered a unique perspective. He argued that technological advancement actually hinders societal progress. Essentially, technology creates one-dimensional people, eroding the proletariat's revolutionary consciousness. All right, now that we know the background of this book, we can start with two questions to understand One-Dimensional Man more deeply. What is the first question? It's one-dimensional man. The second question is, how exactly does technological development create one-dimensional people? Let's first look at the first question. What exactly does one-dimensional man mean? Actually, so-called one-dimensionality is relative to multidimensionality. The question is, what is multidimensionality? Marcuse believed that humans are multidimensional creatures. On one hand, we live in the present, always worrying about things like what to eat today or what to wear today. But on the other hand, our vision can transcend the immediate day. We can appreciate art non-utilitarianly and plan for future life. What distinguishes humans from other animals is our ability to plan for the long-term future, even for a lifetime. And this future-oriented perspective, more broadly, the characteristic of humans is multidimensional thinking. Don't underestimate human multidimensional thinking, because it has two important meanings. First, it relates to human freedom. We often say life isn't just about the immediate drudgery, but also about poetry and distant horizons. Why are poetry and distant horizons worth pursuing? Because it symbolizes escaping daily labor and represents an imagination of freedom. And here we consciously or unconsciously employ multidimensional thinking. Second, multidimensional thinking is also a form of critical thinking. Similarly, we can summarize it in one phrase: ideals are plump, reality is bony. People yearn for a better future life because they often see problems and contradictions in real life. We all admit that there's always a gap between ideals and reality. The role of multidimensional thinking is to make people see this gap, to see the irrationality of the existing society. Only then will people take action to change society, and thus society progresses forward. For example, it was precisely because the proletariat saw the irrationality of the capitalist social system, and the exploitation hidden behind daily labor that they launched revolutions to overthrow the old regime. All right, we've clarified multidimensionality. Then understanding what one-dimensionality means isn't hard. First, one-dimensional thinking is entirely uncritical. Marcuse also called it affirmative thinking. There's a widely circulated saying, whatever exists is reasonable. This very typically embodies one-dimensional thinking. People who hold this view believe that everything in real life is wonderful, or at least understandable, and the gap between ideals and reality disappears. It can be said that in the eyes of one-dimensional people, life has lost its poetry and distant horizons because they are very satisfied with the immediate drudgery. So they tend to conform more easily to the current order. Secondly, from another perspective, one-dimensional people are also unfree because they mistakenly believe their lives are wonderful. And Marcuse observed that Americans living in advanced industrial societies are quintessential one-dimensional people, and their degree of enslavement is even more severe than that of Jews under Nazi rule. Some might find it strange. Americans can eat whatever they want, watch whatever movies they want, and even vote to influence which political leaders come to power. Isn't that freedom enough? Marcuse believed the key is that one-dimensional people always think the current situation is joyful and complete, but lack the ability to contemplate what true happiness really is. More importantly, the operational goal of American society is to cultivate one-dimensional people. Under the terror rule of Nazi Germany, people knew it was wrong and could resist in various forms. But in America, there's no need for concentration camps. Rulers just need to create one-dimensional thinking ideologically, making people feel their current lives are good enough, thus mentally abandoning resistance. This form of suppression appears gentler and more thorough. All right, what exactly does one-dimensional man mean? At this point, we've basically understood. In summary, it refers to people who only conform to the current order, who believe their lives are happy, unable to see contradictions in reality, thus losing their ability to act and becoming unfree. Yeah. With that said, we come to the second important question. How exactly do these one-dimensional people come about? It can be said they are a product of advanced industrial society, which creates one-dimensional people. The most crucial point is to make people feel satisfied, not to let anyone have any dissatisfaction with the current order. We must try to provide a false sense of happiness. Technological progress plays a key role in this. To understand this mechanism, we can approach it from three aspects. First, the unification of lifestyles. Second, the mediocrity of aesthetic activities. Third, the closure of language. Next, we'll analyze each one by one. First, technological advancement makes everyone's lifestyles increasingly similar and blurred. But the external boundaries between rulers and the ruled become blurred, making it hard to see obvious hierarchies on the surface. This causes the ruled to lose their target for criticism and even develop psychological identification with capitalists. Let's take labor itself as an example. Marcuse noted that in the early days of the Industrial Revolution, workers' labor was primarily physical. At that time, the difference between laborers in sweatshops and the lofty factory managers was very clear. But with technological progress, many physical tasks have been taken over by machines. More and more workers have moved from factories to offices, becoming white-collar workers, clerks, and professional managers, with their daily work shifting towards management. The overall trend is a shift from physical labor to mental labor, and the boundaries between workers and capitalists gradually blur. We see that in the same company. Employers and employees have their own office spaces. Although sizes may differ, overall, they share the same office building, ride the same elevator, and enjoy the cool air from central air conditioning. Employers are seen constantly, no longer viewed as lofty, unreachable exploiters. Compared to the early Industrial Revolution, this distance has shortened, l- leading workers to mistakenly believe there's little difference between employers and employees, even fostering a sense of identification. Beyond labor methods becoming similar, in daily life, rulers and the ruled also converge more. Thanks to technological progress, high-tech products like Apple phones can be mass-produced, making them affordable for ordinary people. Its global popularity is a classic example. Everyone knows that the smartphones produced by Apple Inc. in the US are almost the most popular electronic devices on the planet. And from successful business people to Hollywood stars to ordinary folks, everyone can have an iPhone. People use the same devices to browse the internet, shop, navigate, and watch videos. Driven by technology, the daily lives of different classes become increasingly indistinguishable. But this doesn't mean class inequality has been eliminated. The technological progress creates an illusion of equality, making people mistakenly believe that since they can afford so-called high-end products, the difference between them and others isn't that significant. Gradually, the ruled start feeling there's no essential difference between them and the rulers. Society seems equal enough that they don't need to push for change. All right, we've covered the unification of lifestyles. Now let's examine the second mechanism of one-dimensionality, the mediocrity of aesthetic activities. Undoubtedly, technological progress makes high art easily accessible. The most typical example is how paintings and music have been digitized, freeing them from physical limitations. But the problem is, once high culture becomes instantly available, its so-called highness quickly becomes mediocre. Thus, aesthetic activities that should help overcome one-dimensionality end up creating one-dimensional people. Marcuse believed aesthetic activities can open multiple dimensions of human life, making them the natural enemy of one-dimensional thinking. Imagine music enthusiasts having to attend live concerts to hear classical music. This behavior interrupts our daily rhythm because we step away from work, shifting attention from daily necessities. On the other hand, while listening to music, our imagination is stimulated, horizons broaden, we begin yearning for beauty, and increasingly recognize the filth and misery of real life. Technological advancement has changed how art is disseminated, making aesthetic activities simpler. Today, if you want to appreciate Da Vinci's Mona Lisa, you don't need to travel all the way to the Louvre. Just open your computer, click a button, and the masterpiece appears on screen, even set as wallpaper, to enjoy anytime. If you want to hear Beethoven's Symphony No. 5, no need for concert halls. Just tap to download it to your phone and listen while cooking, commuting, or even working. Someone might say, "Isn't this great for Beethoven's magnificent music?" And doesn't technology make our aesthetic activities more convenient? Please note, while technology popularizes high culture, it simultaneously eliminates the conditions for its existence. When Symphony No. 5 sits in your phone, it becomes just background music for daily life. Playable, pausable, fast-forwardable, at will, perfectly integrated into the mundane. Thus, the function of transcending daily life has been forgotten. Everyone remembers the melodies firmly, but the profound meaning behind the music often requires us to put down work and listen with closed eyes to truly appreciate it. But clearly, technological progress has made culture mediocre, flattening the sublimating effect of artistic works. All right, let's examine the final mechanism of one-dimensionality, the closure of language. This point is the most abstract and the most important. We know that saying humans are thinking animals is essentially the same as saying humans are speaking animals. The relationship between thought and language couldn't be closer, as language provides the tools for our thinking. Therefore, to change how people think about the world, the most crucial step is to change their language. Marcuse believed technological progress not only brings new products, but also reorganizes speech patterns. In a society filled with fast consumption concepts and rapid changes, language becomes simplified and flattened, carrying people away with novelties. These are isolated concepts like big data, blockchain, and similar terms. People only remember these terms without time to delve deeper. For example, where exactly is big data smart? And who manipulates and controls this blockchain? Before people can deeply explore these questions, new terms flood the media. Over time, people lose the ability to describe complexity, becoming speechless and unable to contemplate societal irrationalities. This is language closure. The most typical closure phenomenon is abbreviations. Why are abbreviations so prevalent in modern society? Superficially, it's simple. The original terms are too long. They're inconvenient for daily use, especially with new things brought by technological progress. When traditional lexicons lack corresponding words, we resort to abbreviations like CD-ROM, USB drives, etc. But when using abbreviations, what's omitted isn't just words, but the concrete objects behind them. Here begins the mechanism shaping one-dimensional thinking. For example, there's an international organization called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, born during the Cold War as a U.S.-led military alliance, externally claiming to be a self-defense organization, though actually countering the Soviet Union. Its full name is very long. For convenience, people usually take the first letters of its English spelling, abbreviating it as NATO, or in Chinese, we call it Beiyu. Problems arise when people refer to this organization as NATO or Beiyu with just a few English letters or two simple Chinese characters. It's impossible to connect it to any specific member country. Nor can you tell from these simple letters that it's a military organization. Furthermore, abbreviations obscure history by inventing new terms, because based on these letters alone, no one can discern its founding purpose. Why would countries like Turkey and Greece, located by the Mediterranean, be members of the so-called North Atlantic Treaty? Let's take another example. As we all know, through generations of workers' relentless struggles, the modern world follows an 8-hour workday system, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. However, in recent years, many companies encourage extending work hours, attempting to make employees work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. This work pattern also has an abbreviation called 996. We might find that saying one must work 12-hour shifts might provoke inner resistance. But once framed as 996, these three abstract Arabic numerals, they're no direct relation to excessive work hours, blocking critical thinking and causing people to overlook concrete issues. For instance, why extend work hours? Is it due to inefficiency during normal hours? Do the extended work hours come with commensurate compensation? Why are work assistance tools becoming more advanced? Why haven't our work hours decreased but instead increased? In short, we see how the prevalence of abbreviations in modern society helps avoid unpleasant associations, constrains thinking, and ultimately turns everyone into one-dimensional people. Here we can summarize the book's fundamental argument. Technological progress not only changes material life, but also how people think about the world by making lifestyles more uniform, art more mediocre, and language simpler. Technology ultimately creates one-dimensional people who, living in advanced industrial societies, lose critical awareness. They believe the world is already perfect, making change impossible and freedom undesirable. Thus, technology becomes the greatest obstacle to social progress. Finally, let's look at the impact this book has produced. First, One-Dimensional Man is one of the most important philosophical works of the 20th century. It integrates German classical philosophy, Marxist philosophy, Freudian psychoanalysis, and the then popular existentialism, fully revealing Marcuse's intellectual depth. With this book, Marcuse entered the Hall of Fame in Western thought, becoming an indispensable figure in Western Marxism. Second, in a way, this book also resonates with the spirit of the times. As an obscure and difficult theoretical book, it sold 100,000 copies within a few years of its release in the US and was translated into 16 languages. Almost everyone in intellectual circles had a copy because the era of this book's publication coincided with the turbulent international scene of the 60s. Although Marcuse's attitude in the book was pessimistic and he felt it difficult to find solutions to break the cage, this work still inspired social revolutions in the Western world during the 60s. In France's May 1968 events, people placed him alongside Marx and Mao Zedong as one of the most important revolutionary thinkers. Third, this book is not only a product of 20th century revolutionary waves, but more importantly, many of its views are highly prescient. It's hard to imagine that this theoretical book, written half a century ago, still feels relevant today. If we replace the examples in the original book with today's, it's not hard to see that this theory still has great explanatory power. Today, the pace of global technological progress is accelerating, and the extent to which people are dominated by technology or seems to be worsening. It can be said that anyone who wants to understand the truth of the technological age should personally read One Dimensional Man. All right, that concludes our introduction to One Dimensional Man. Listening notes are below the audio, and we'll see you tomorrow.